Death at Rottingdean. Chapter 6. For years they defied the law and plied their trade with so much caution that no real evidence could be brought against them. No doubt this was in measure owing to the connivance of the inhabitants. A. Cecil Piper, Alfriston, A History. Amelia gave a last pat to Lady Sheridan's upswept hair and stood back from the mirrored dressing table at which her mistress was seated. "There," she said with satisfaction. "What do you think, milady?" "You've done quite beautifully, Amelia," Lady Sheridan said, turning to inspect the twist of her back hair with a hand mirror, "as you always do." Amelia replaced the silver brush and comb in the velvet-lined travel case. "It isn't a hard job." She gave her mistress an admiring glance. "You've beautiful hair, Mum. So thick and shiny." "Thank you," Lady Sheridan said, and smiled as she stood and shook out the skirts of her green dress. "Flattery has earned you the evening off, my dear. It may be late, and I shan't be needing you when we return from the Kiplings." She opened her glove case and began to sort through her gloves. "How do you find your room? Are you and Lawrence quite comfortable?" "Oh, yes, Mum," Amelia said earnestly, "although nothing is as nice as our cottage at Bishop's Keep." In Amelia's view, her own rose-covered gatehouse cottage at Lady Sheridan's home was the most beautiful spot in all of England. But this was her first visit to the south coast, and she would have been pleased to sleep in a mouse-hole as long as it was in sight of the sea. "And Miss Portney seems a pleasant sort," she added tentatively. Lady Sheridan, inspecting a button on her gloves, glanced up. "Only seems?" she asked with a lift of her eyebrow. Amelia hesitated before she answered. Miss Portney was the cook-housekeeper who came with the house Lord and Lady Sheridan had taken for the holiday. Seabrook House it was called, a narrow two-story house that fronted on the high street near St. Albans School, with a wrought-iron veranda and a generous back garden and roses tumbling everywhere. It was quite a lovely house, and Mrs. Portney managed it adequately, as far as Amelia could tell, although their coming seemed to have taken the woman by surprise, for she did not have the beds aired nor a food supply laid in. And there was the matter of the mysterious noises below stairs last night. If Amelia could believe her ears, the narrow-faced, long-nosed Miss Portney had been entertaining a male visitor in the vicinity of the wine cellar. More than one visitor, perhaps, from the energetic thumping and bumping and the sound, quite late into the night, of glass breaking. But Amelia did not like to make accusations, so she only smiled and gave a little shrug. As she often did, Lady Sheridan seemed to understand without being told. She smiled. "I'm sure we must all be willing to put up with a bit of unpleasantness now and then in order to make the most of our holiday." She put a finger under Amelia's chin and raised it, studying her face with a frown. "But I'm a trifle concerned about you, my dear. You are more pale than I like. Are you not sleeping? Are you well?" Amelia turned her head aside. It wasn't that she wasn't well, for she was very well, although occasionally a bit nauseous in the morning. In fact, she was pregnant with her first child. She was pleased for herself and Lawrence that she hardly knew how to conceal her delight, but yet hidden her condition from her ladyship for the few weeks she had known of it because of what poor Lady Sheridan had suffered this last spring and summer. It was a tragedy to lose a child, certainly, although women were always losing their first child and then going on to have a houseful. But to forever lose all hope of having a child, that was a calamity of such enormous proportions that the thought of it made Amelia turn cold with fear. She did not know how her ladyship could bear it, and indeed it must have been very hard, for she came upon her ladyship weeping bitterly many a time in the past month. Lady Sheridan had been so deathly ill that it was feared she might be lost as well as the babe, and it was all on account of coming to London, where there were such dirty fogs and choking air and terrible slums, where ladies who went to do good works could catch the measles. Now, however, her ladyship was smiling. "You're going to have a baby," she said quietly. "Is that it, my dear?" "In 6 months' time, Mum," Amelia said, and was swept into her employer's warm embrace. "Oh, Amelia," Lady Sheridan cried, tearfully holding her close. "I'm so delighted for you." "Thank you, my lady," Amelia said, sniffing. "I've been wanting to tell you, but I was afraid, that is—" And she felt her eyes fill up with tears and heard herself begin to sob, imagining the bitter pang her ladyship must feel at this news. "There, there, Amelia," her ladyship said comfortingly, patting her shoulder. "Having a baby is nothing to cry over, and if your tears are for me, they truly are not necessary, my dear. I will take every bit as much pleasure in your child as I would in my own, and it will help me forget my own pain." She took a handkerchief from the dressing table and dabbed it at Amelia's eyes. "There, we shall have no more weeping." "Thank you, Mum," Amelia whispered, almost overcome. And you must promise me that you'll take good care of yourself, her ladyship added sternly. No carrying buckets of bathwater up and down the stairs. If Lawrence isn't available, we shall see if Mrs. Portnoy can't find a strong boy for that job. She turned beaming as Lord Sheridan opened the door and came into the bedroom. Charles, I've just heard the most blessed news. Charles Sheridan never ceased to be amazed by his wife. He knew how devastated she had been at the loss of the child and the knowledge that she could never conceive another. Yet here she was pretending to be absolutely delighted by the news that her maid was to have a baby of her own, displaying not even a flicker of envy or sorrow. But it was like Kate to conceal her deepest feelings so that she did not darken Amelia's joy. So Charles responded with an equal warmth, congratulating Amelia and promising himself privately to see an increase in Lawrence's salary, now that he was to be a family man. When Amelia had curtsied and left the room, Kate sighed and turned away, and Charles thought what pretense of happiness must have caused her. He put his arms around her for a moment, holding her close, thinking how brave she was and yet how fragile. He still went cold at the memory of her long illness. The death of the child he could bear. It was the mother he cherished with all his soul, and whose loss would have meant the end of every joy. Now he looked down at her with concern. They had walked for a long distance on the cliff above the sea this morning, and she must be tired. Are you sure you feel up to visiting the Kiplings tonight, Kate? For a moment she looked as if she might decide not to go, and Charles remembered somewhat guiltily that he had promised that they would keep to themselves this holiday. Then she said, "Oh yes, I'm quite well, and I'm anxious to visit the cellar and see if I can coax the ghost to show himself." She smiled. "So, Charles, tell me about your investigation of the body on the beach. What happened after I left?" Charles laughed shortly. "Well, there's not much to tell," he said. "As Kipling remarked, Constable Woodhouse is a hard-headed man. More than that, he's very set in his ways, the old ways. He told me to go about my business politely, of course, but he made it plain that he would tolerate no interference in his investigation." Kate frowned. "What did he say to the boy's story?" "We didn't get that far," Charles said. "Kipling took the rejection personally and did not put the boy forward. His name, by the way," he added, "is Patrick." "But the boy, Patrick, saw the murderer," Kate exclaimed. "He told us himself. He might be able to identify him, if he is telling the truth." Charles said cautiously, "He saw the body being disposed of. It is not exactly the same thing." "You didn't believe him?" Kate asked, sounding surprised. "I thought he seemed quite sincere and remarkably composed for a boy of his age. What reason would he have to lie?" Charles chuckled dryly. "What reasons do boys have to tell fanciful tales? However, the question is moot, Kate. Woodhouse refused all assistance. Kipling clamped his mouth shut like a sour clam, and Patrick prudently disappeared. I doubt," he added with a wry twist, "that he was eager to tell his story to the constable after all. If word got out that he was a witness—" Charles didn't finish the sentence. Kate's eyebrows went up. "You don't suppose the boy is in danger?" "No, not that," Charles said slowly. "But the villagers seem inordinately suspicious of nearly everything that happens. If it's known that the boy spoke to Kipling or to me about what he had seen, he might come in for a bad time of it." "I've noticed a suspicion too," Kate said. "Even our cook-housekeeper don't seem happy to have us here." She frowned. "The oddest thing, Charles. You remember that we are to have the use of the wine cellar, I suppose? Well, I went there this morning to check the bottles against the inventory Mrs. Seabrook sent us so that an accounting can be made when we are ready to leave. I found a damp spot where a substantial amount of brandy had been spilled in the last few days, I'd say, and evidence that the shelves had recently killed quite a few more bottles than were accounted for in the inventory." "As long as there were no fewer, I don't suppose it matters," Charles said. "It would be a pity to learn that the estimable Miss Portney has been indulging herself while the house stood vacant." He returned to his subject. "Anyway, Woodhouse is no different than most village constables. They all believe that cameras are best used for recording children having picnics and for people playing croquet. They have no idea of using them as serious tools in a murder investigation. Why not even Scotland Yard has thought of it." Kate picked up her gloves. "So it's officially a murder, then?" "The constable would say nothing," Charles replied, "and prevented me from getting a close look. But I saw evidence that the poor chap had been knifed. There were bloodstains under his jersey and what looked to be a puncture wound." He paused. "No doubt there will be a coroner's inquest, however, and the truth will be learned." He gave her a narrow look. "This is none of our affair, Kate. You do know that, don't you?" But Kate did not appear to even hear him. Who would murder a coastguard? She asked musingly. A smuggler, do you think? In one of your sensational fictions, perhaps, Charles said with a laugh. He adored his wife and admired her shrewd logic, but she was prone to flights of fancy. This is the modern era, Kate. There is very little money to be earned in smuggling, and hence very little incentive to take that risk. Oh? Kate asked archly. Then why do I see that small army of blue-coated and brass-buttoned functionaries lined up at the Charing Cross station when the Continental Express is due? I want to watch them apprehend the lady who was concealing a large case of cigars in her hat box. That is a different thing entirely, Charles said. The smuggling that went on along the coast 60 years ago was a wholesale smuggling designed to evade the excise. Entire shiploads of spirits, tobacco, tea, lace, goods that were heavily taxed were ferried onshore here and at Hastings and Cockmere Haven. Dozens of men were used to move the cargo off the boats and many others to convey it to Brighton, Falmouth and Lewes and thence to London. It was a major source of commerce. Kate looked at him in wonderment. But how was all this actively kept from the villagers? It wasn't, Charles said. They connived in it. Ah! Kate picked up her hat and turned it thoughtfully, straightening the silk roses around the brim. Of course, they must have concealed the contraband until it could be freighted to the cities, and profited thereby, Charles said. But now that the excise laws have been changed, there is little profit, less smuggling, and nothing to connive at. But it would make a marvellous novel, Kate said. So it would, Charles replied encouragingly. The very thing for you to work on while we are here. He hoped that Kate would go back to her writing, for she was always the happiest when she was engaged with one of her stories. He took out his watch and glanced at it. If we are going to arrive at the Elms when we promised, we had best be going. Shall I have Lawrence fetch the motor car? I don't want you to exert yourself if you're tired. Don't be silly, Kate said. It's only a short way and quite a lovely night. She began pinning her hat to her hair. But if there is no smuggling, she said around the hat pins of her mouth, who did kill the coastguard, and why?